scientists are studying how vitamin D can help prevent diseases, but it's not clear if taking more than the recommended amount is really beneficial. Some studies show that people in sunnier places or with higher vitamin D levels might have lower rates of certain diseases. However, when researchers give vitamin D supplements to people with a specific disease, the results are not clear. This could be because of how the studies are set up, differences in how vitamin D is absorbed in different groups of people, and the varying amounts given to participants. To know more about vitamin D and its connection to specific health conditions, more research is needed. Bone health and muscle strength. Studies show that having low levels of vitamin D in your blood can make older adults more likely to break their bones. Some studies suggest that taking a certain amount of vitamin D might prevent these fractures, but not all studies agree. In one study with over 42,000 people who were 65 or older, researchers found that taking higher doses of vitamin D, around 500-800 IU per day, reduced the risk of hip and non-spine fractures by about 20%. However, lower doses, 400 IU or less, didn't seem to help prevent fractures. Another review of 53 studies with almost 92,000 older people didn't find a strong link between taking only vitamin D and preventing fractures. However, when vitamin D was taken with calcium, there was a small protective effect. A big study with over 25,000 participants didn't show that taking 2,000 IU of vitamin D daily had any effect on preventing bone fractures. The people in this study were generally healthy and not specifically chosen because of bone issues. Vitamin D might also help keep your muscles strong, which is important for preventing falls. Some studies found that taking 700 to 1,000 IU of vitamin D per day lowered the risk of falls by 19%. However, the VITAL trial, which followed healthy middle-aged people, didn't show any reduction in falls with 2,000 IU of vitamin D daily. While taking up to 800 IU of vitamin D daily might be good for bone health in some older adults, it's essential to be careful with very high doses. In one study, giving women 70 years or older a very high yearly dose of 500,000 IU for 5 years increased the risk of falls and fractures. It's suggested that such high doses may actually lead to lower levels of active vitamin D in the blood. So, it's important to talk to your doctor about the right amount of vitamin D for you. Cancer and vitamin D. About 30 years ago, scientists noticed something interesting about colon cancer and where people lived. Those in the northern U.S., at higher latitudes, had more deaths from colon cancer compared to those living closer to the equator. Many ideas about vitamin D and disease come from studies that looked at sunlight and disease rates in different countries. While these studies are a good starting point, they don't give us the most certain information. In places with higher latitudes, the sun's rays are not as strong, and people there tend to have lower levels of vitamin D in their blood. This made scientists think that low vitamin D levels might increase the risk of colon cancer. Tests on animals and in labs have shown that vitamin D can stop tumors from forming and slow down the growth of existing tumors in the breast, ovary, colon, prostate, and brain. In people, studies have found that higher levels of vitamin D in the blood are linked to much lower rates of colon, pancreatic, prostate, and other cancers. The evidence is strongest for colorectal cancer, type 2 diabetes, and vitamin D. Not having enough vitamin D might affect how our body works and make it more likely to get type 2 diabetes. This happens because it can mess up the important processes in our body that lead to type 2 diabetes, like how the pancreas works, how our body uses insulin, and how inflammation happens. Studies that looked at people over time have found that having higher levels of vitamin D in the blood is linked to a lower chance of getting type 2 diabetes. In one study that followed over 83,000 women without diabetes for 20 years, researchers looked at their vitamin D and calcium intake from food and supplements. They found that women who took more vitamin D from supplements had a 13% lower risk of getting type 2 diabetes compared to those who took less. The risk was even lower when they also took calcium, 33% lower for women who took both high amounts of calcium and vitamin D compared to those who took lower amounts. Flu and the common cold. The flu virus is most active during the winter and less so in the summer. A British doctor once thought that sunlight might be linked to flu outbreaks. And more than 20 years later, some scientists suggested that vitamin D could be the reason. They had a few reasons for thinking this. Vitamin D levels are lowest in the winter. The active form of vitamin D helps control the damaging response of certain white blood cells and boosts the production of proteins that fight germs. Kids with not enough vitamin D are more likely to get respiratory infections, while those who spend time in the sunlight tend to have fewer infections. Adults with low vitamin D levels are more likely to say they recently had a cough, cold, or upper respiratory infection. In a study with Japanese schoolchildren, researchers wanted to see if taking vitamin D pills every day could prevent the flu during winter. They followed about 340 kids for 4 months. Half of them got pills with 1,200 IU of vitamin D, and the other half got fake pills. The ones who took vitamin D had about 40% fewer cases of type A influenza compared to the ones who took the fake pills. Risk of premature death. There's a hopeful report that says taking vitamin D supplements might lower the chances of dying early. A study looked at many other studies and found that taking modest amounts of vitamin D supplements reduced the overall risk of death by 7%. About 60,000 people in these studies took vitamin D every day for around 5 years. But it's important to know that this analysis has some limitations. The studies it looked at were not specifically designed to explore overall death rates or the reasons for specific types of deaths. Another study suggests that the lower risk of death is mostly because of a lower risk of dying from cancer. Still, more research is needed before we can confidently say that vitamin D really helps prevent early death. In a big study with over 307,000 white European people, researchers found that having low levels of vitamin D in the blood was linked to a 25% higher risk of dying early from any cause. This risk was compared to those with higher vitamin D levels, which the National Academy of Medicine considers adequate for most people. The study also found increased risks for deaths related to heart disease, cancer, and lung problems. The risks went up even more for people with even lower levels of vitamin D. The study used a method called Mendelian randomization, which looked at genetic differences to confirm these findings. This is important because it shows that having low vitamin D levels is directly connected to the risk of dying early. The method also made sure other factors like obesity, smoking, and drinking didn't confuse the results. Thinking problems. When scientists looked at over 427,000 white European people, they found that those with low levels of vitamin D in their blood, less than 25 nmol/L, had a 54% higher risk of having problems with memory and thinking compared to those with enough vitamin D, around 50 nmol/L. Foods with vitamin D. There are not many foods that naturally have a lot of vitamin D. The best ones are the meat of fatty fish and fish liver oils. You can also find smaller amounts in egg yolks, cheese, and beef liver. Some mushrooms have a bit of vitamin D too, and some mushrooms sold in stores have more because they're exposed to a lot of ultraviolet light on purpose. Many foods and supplements have extra vitamin D added to them, like dairy products and cereals. Here are some examples of foods with vitamin D. Cod liver oil, salmon, swordfish, tuna fish, orange juice with added vitamin D, dairy and plant milks with added vitamin D, sardines, beef liver, egg yolk, fortified cereals. Ultraviolet light and vitamin D. Our bodies can make vitamin D when our skin reacts with the sun's UVB light, also known as tanning rays. This happens when a chemical in our skin called 7-dehydrocholesterol breaks down. However, there are factors that can reduce how much vitamin D we get from the sun. Sunscreen. Using sunscreen correctly can reduce vitamin D absorption by more than 90%. Covering up. Wearing clothes that cover our skin. Less time outdoors, spending too little time outside. Darker skin. People with darker skin have more melanin, which acts like a natural sunscreen. Getting older. As we age, our levels of 7-dehydrocholesterol decrease, and changes in our skin happen. Older people also tend to spend more time indoors. Seasons and location. In certain seasons and in places far from the equator, where the sun's UVB light is weaker, it's harder to make enough vitamin D from the sun. For example, in some northern cities like Boston, US, Edmonton, Canada, and Bergen, Norway, people may not get enough sun for 4 to 6 months of the year. In the southern hemisphere, places like Buenos Aires, Argentina, and Cape Town, South Africa, get less vitamin D from the sun during their winter months, June through August. The body stores vitamin D from summer sun, but in these higher latitude areas, it has to last for many months. And by late winter, many people may not have enough. Remember, too much sun can cause skin cancer, so it's important not to spend too much time in the sun and avoid using tanning beds. Lack and too much vitamin D. Not having enough vitamin D can happen if you don't get it from your diet, have trouble absorbing it, or need more than usual. If you don't eat enough vitamin D and don't spend enough time in the sun over a long time, you might end up with a deficiency. People who can't have or don't eat certain foods like milk, eggs, and fish. For example, those who are lactose intolerant or follow a vegan diet are at a higher risk. Others at risk include people with digestive problems like inflammatory bowel disease, Those who are overweight, as vitamin D gets stored in fat and may not be easily used by the body. Individuals who had gastric bypass surgery. Conditions that can happen due to not having enough vitamin D for a long time include rickets, soft bones and deformities in babies and children, osteomalacia, weak and soft bones in adults, which can be fixed with supplements. This is different from osteoporosis, where bones become brittle and the damage is not reversible. Getting too much vitamin D usually happens when taking supplements, not from the small amounts in food. Sun exposure doesn't cause toxicity because the body prevents excess heat on the skin from turning into too much D3. It's recommended not to take daily vitamin D supplements with more than 4,000 IU unless your doctor is keeping an eye on it. Signs of having too much vitamin D include loss of appetite, anorexia, weight loss, irregular heartbeat, hardening of blood vessels and tissues. This is because there's too much calcium in the blood, which can damage the heart and kidneys. Did you know? Sitting in a sunny office or driving in a car won't give you vitamin D because the glass in windows completely stops the UVB ultraviolet light from the sun. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of vitamin D. We hope you found valuable insights about the sunshine vitamin and its incredible impact on your health. Remember, whether through sunlight, diet, or supplements, ensuring you get enough vitamin D is a key step towards a healthier lifestyle. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more health tips, and hit the notification bell to stay updated. Share this knowledge with your friends and family, because a little vitamin D wisdom can go a long way in boosting well-being. Stay healthy, stay happy.